Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Hey Sister. Hey Sister, how you doing?
Hey, sister, doing well, doing well. How about yourself?
Oh, I can't complain. It is Women's History Month. I think that's
Indeed
what
it
they're
is.
saying it is. And we just come off of Black History and we got Women's History. And then next month is Black Women's History Month. I mean, come on. It's a great
Oh,
time to be alive, right?
oh, that's I wasn't aware that next month was Black Women History Month.
Yeah, girl. Black women got a whole history month to themselves. What you think about that?
Well, let's just see how much that's embraced.
Oh, well, folks, as always, well, first of all, we want to say we appreciate those of you who watch and who watch consistently, those of you who watch on the replay or listen to us in your drive time. We thank you for being a part of the Hey Sister family. We ask that you continue to help us grow on this platform, like, follow, share, and subscribe. Let people know that you tune in regularly to Hey Sister to be a part of our conversations, and we want you also to join the conversation in the comments. That's where the action happens. So go tell a friend right now, hey, stop what you're doing. Give me a little bit of your time. Get on YouTube, get on Facebook, and join me live in this Hey Sister conversation. And finally, check out our website, heysister.com. You never have to miss an episode. You can always be here and join us in the conversation. So tonight, we are not going to do any hot topics. We're going to talk about corporate conundrum, right? And so a conundrum is a situation, a confusing or difficult problem or question. That's the definition of a conundrum. And those of us who have been in corporate, those of us who are still in corporate, we find ourselves in these corporate conundrums all the time. So I know, sister, you posted something recently on your LinkedIn that spurred a lot of kind of energy and conversation. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, sure thing. So I posted about a week ago. I said, in the past year, I've witnessed many of my friends and former colleagues experience layoffs. It's been a turbulent time across various industries with no roles, titles, or seniority guaranteeing stability. While my job transition was a unique one, I too was technically laid off, and the disruption, albeit temporary, was still quite unsettling. In light of these challenges, what has been your most valuable tool for finding the next opportunity? And as we were all connected on this platform, which is LinkedIn, I wonder, is LinkedIn still an effective resource for job hunters? I'm eager to hear your perspectives. And now I have 2,152 impressions. Um, I actually thought about taking that post down because I figured, well, there were some people who responded to me in private messages. So I figured that there was some fear of reprisal if they were to, voice their opinion publicly. But then I also had a friend who, and I was kind of afraid of it, who thought that I guess, thought that there was some underlying meaning, like I was job hunting through this post. And that wasn't my intention. I genuinely wanted to understand, what are people using LinkedIn for? How is it a resource? How is it a tool for them in their job hunt? Because for me, I have seen recently just a lot of people, they're celebrating things that they've accomplished. They're posting. I will dare to say somebody even said it's a lot of flossing, what have you, but not necessarily that the whole premise of LinkedIn was based on the whole 6 degrees of separation. 6 degrees are fewer of separation in terms of helping you with your job search. So I just really was pondering if it's still an effective tool. And but because of those questions, I think we wanted to talk more about the corporate conundrum right now.
Yeah, because again, the definition of the word conundrum is a confusing and difficult problem or question. And what many of us find, I, as an executive coach, I am working with clients every day that are dealing with a variety of corporate conundrums. But let's start off with one that I have faced and had a question about. And we have a whole law that was written. Shout out to Dr. Wendy Green, because she was a previous guest on Hey Sister talking about the Crown Act.
Mhm.
And I am not my hair. So if you are in a corporate setting and you are still asking the question, are still faced with question concern about wearing your hair in the state in which it grows out of your scalp, or in a protective style, or if you're choosing a wig over the natural state, let's talk about that corporate conundrum. So I'll tell a little story. I had a conversation once with someone who I worked with, who I love and respect, and is a friend. And the question was asked that I think the way that I wore my hair impacted people's perception of me in their workplace. And my response was, if it is, they better not say nothing, because then this whole thing gonna be mine, because I'm gonna shut this thing down. That was kind of my reply. I was so frustrated. I was so angry. And she and I were having a partnership conversation about, hey, we have some things that we need to do, because in some of the conversations I've been a part of, I don't think people realize who you are, what value you bring, and we need to shift this perception amongst my peers. And so it still was so off-putting. It
Mhm.
was off-putting because, one, she was gonna be the only person, because she too was a Black woman, who would even be comfortable or confident enough to even have that conversation. And it may have been because we were friends as well, right? So we already had a friendship predating us working together. But it was a question that should have never been asked. It was a conversation that never should have taken place, because how we choose to wear our hair at this stage in the year of our Lord 2024, it's tired, it's dated, and it's not necessary.
Mhm.
Because if that is such a distraction, not the work that I'm doing, then maybe I'm in the wrong place. At least that's how I take it. I don't know. Are you, if you're out there, those of you who are watching, are you still facing a hair conundrum? I've seen it. And we also, if you follow the news, you see still in a lot of school settings around the country, even though the Crown Act has passed in some in places, that there's still hair discrimination that is taking place.
Yeah, I think the young man in Texas just recently, a judge ruled that the Crown Act could not be used in his circumstance because of he's at in school. Listen, I feel like this shouldn't even be a conundrum because this is tired. At the end of the day, you should be more worried about what's in my head, not what's on it. And today I'm doing something different. I've never really had a problem per se in how I wear my hair. I've been natural since 2000, and so I've not really had a big issue with how I wear my hair. But I also know that I have experienced feeling being treated differently when my hair is straight versus when it's curly. Um, again, this should not even be a part of the conversation. And if there are companies still willing to fall on this sword, I, I would highly encourage you just not to work for those organizations, because I know we're going to talk about DEI, but again, our diversity is what makes us better. And so I do not want to go anywhere, whether it's where I work or where I live, where everybody looks the same, thinks the same, wears their hair the same. I'm not comfortable in those kind of environments. I don't think they foster the best in us either. So, like I said, if we still having these conversations, like in the year of our Lord 2024, especially with corporations where people are coming, a multinational corporation absolutely should never be having these conversations at this point.
But what's interesting is that the conversations are not had. And I think that is what's the bigger issue. Like I said, I worked with someone who was comfortable enough with me to
Yeah.
engage in that conversation. But what that tells me is that in her circle, at her level, others were having a conversation about my hair and not saying it out loud.
But I don't know if that's necessarily true. Here's why. I had a colleague who I worked
Oh,
with.
I know it's absolutely true.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I had a colleague who I worked with. She loved that I wore my natural hair all the time. She told that to me more than one time. And she, who also had curly hair, would always like kind of pull it back in a very small ponytail, what have you, because she had encountered another Black woman who, in the same way, suggested to her that she was not moving ahead because of how her hair was. So that's why she decided to pull it back. I honestly think that sometimes, let me say it like this, maybe some of those conversations are being had, but maybe sometimes we're projecting what we really believe. Maybe sometimes we, as sister friends, are uncomfortable seeing our other sister with her hair a certain way. And we feel like, oh, she's not moving up because of, no, that's possibly your projection. You're projecting those views onto that person. That may not be the reason. They may not be moving up because there's a plethora of other reasons why we get overlooked for stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I think it is a part of the unconscious bias piece that still goes on to this day. And so it'll be interesting. I would love if some of y'all have comments to drop it in. I would love our production assistant to drop an article in that she was able to find from the Harvard Business Review about this and how hair discrimination affects Black women at work. And I would love for you all to take a read and check it out for yourselves. You don't have to always believe us. There's a lot of other proof sources out there. But I'm just sharing my experience as well. So let's talk about the conundrum of DEI committees and ERGs. So DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you could add the B, belonging there, is under attack, especially in the state that I live in. In 2020, when we all were at home and we were in the pandemic and we collectively witnessed George Floyd being murdered on television, every organization in every corporate company seemed to find and understand the value and importance of DEI. Not that DEI work had not already been going on and taking place in employee resource groups, but there was an explosion of support and resource. And then, as now we are 4 years out from that, there has been a retrenchment. I think also as people are watching the political headwinds, there's a retrenchment in the support. And so the conundrum is, and in many of the clients that I coach, this work is important. It's important. And you get tapped to serve on a committee. You get tapped to lead a committee. And then you get trapped on that said
Oh,
committee.
tapped and trapped.
You get tapped and then you get trapped and penalized
Mm-hmm.
because you get pigeonholed and the value, the contribution, the skills that you are obtaining doing that work and planning and organizing and all the things that go along with that work is not really valued. And
Right.
so the conundrum, do you work on DEI committees? Do you work and support ERGs? Or do you forego it? And then what conundrum does that put you in when you forego it? So I don't know. What's been your experience on this, sister?
So first I want to just say ERGs are employee resource groups. Some people call them affinity groups. I just wanted to throw that out there. My experience has been varied. In some cases, I have in more cases than not, I've not necessarily been tapped, but I have felt that it was important for my sanity to participate in some of these employee resource groups in order to be around like-minded individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And but I feel very much, again, from a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging standpoint, I feel very much that it is important for every single organization to have DEIB built into their structure from the very top to the bottom. I do not need, because what tends to happen a lot of times is you see diversity, if you will, up to about the director's level.
Mm-hmm.
Or the equivalent, and then going above that, that's where we struggle to see representation, and representation matters. Representation means that I have a seat at the table, or someone who looks like me and who understands some of the things that I've done, or some of the things that I've been through, is at the table and having those important conversations if I'm not physically able to be there. There are plenty of board of directors that are helping to shape the direction of these huge corporations, and some of them have no women on them. If they have women, they have no people of color. That just feels like a big miss. And especially if you're looking at your bottom line, right? If you're seeing declines in your revenue or in your net profit or what have you, I would venture to say you have a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging problem. But I'll tell you, interestingly, so like I said, I was technically laid off, but it was a different kind of layoff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was laid off, but I moved into a new company, right? And in January we didn't have MLK Day off, right? And so we don't, as far as I know, we don't even have ERGs. If they got them, I don't even know where they at. But I spoke up about not having MLK Day off. Like your local headquarters, your US headquarters is in California. Typically in California, you do have, California is one of the states that pretty much is pretty progressive in that kind of way. And I had white colleagues. Well, let me say not even white, non-Black colleagues, because it wasn't just white, non-Black colleagues who were mad that they were not having MLK Day off. Now I know, and they probably not doing community service. I wanted to go do community service. That's what I typically do on MLK Day. I'm pretty certain that was not theirs. They just wanted a longer weekend, but they were upset. But yet it was like, oh, we'll look into it. Nobody was really saying anything. So I decided to say something. And of course, I got this lame excuse of why not. But I pushed back on it. And so, of course, now it's like, well, we'll look into it for next year. And I'm like, yes, MLK Day and Juneteenth. But I know that in speaking up, like I had to say more than one time, because then they started to make it about me. I'm like the only Black person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they started to make it about me wanting MLK Day or me wanting Juneteenth. I'm like, no, no, that's not what it is. These other folks over here complaining, they just not gonna say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to make me, don't pigeonhole me,
Mm-hmm.
because that is unfortunately the conundrum that you find yourself in. You want to speak up about things, but every time then a black issue comes up, it's gonna be like, okay, here she goes. Kind of, I don't need that. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
all that. I'm not putting that on my back.
Right.
I'm not carrying that load. So yeah, I think participating in ERGs has to be a very personal decision. But but if you are going to participate in ERGs, let me just say this last but not least, then there need to be tangible goals that align to the company's overall corporate structure and bottom line. Because if we are quote unquote, first of all, they're typically underfunded
Or not at all.
or not at all. You typically have a senior leader who serves as the ERG sponsor, and it's supposed to be somebody outside of your community, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So that person might just be doing it to say, see, look, I was over the black people's ERG, or I was over the gay people's ERG, so that gives them something else to put on their resume as the white man, or what have you. Make sure they have tangible goals and that they are really about impacting the bottom line. We have to be able to make the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's the only way folks understand.
And here's the thing, we don't have to make that business case. That business case has
Well, the
been
business
made.
case has been
The
made.
business case has been made. You can Harvard Business Review, Yale, Princeton, you can name any of the Wharton School of Business. You can name any of these business schools. The business case has already been made. What has not been made is that corporations truly making the commitment. Because really, at the president, at the CEO level, at the president's level, at the vice president's level, that's where you have to have commitment and buy in. That's where, in their performance metrics, how diverse and how reflective the community of our employees reflect the community in which they serve. I
Right.
saw another picture. So I'll give you like kind of like diametrically opposed pictures. So yesterday I was at an event for the National Sales Network, which is an organization designed to support African Americans and others in sales. And so is not an exclusive, but it's predominantly African Americans who are in this, and it's very heavy driven and sponsored in the pharmaceutical sales industry. But then I saw pictures online of some people who I used to be in sales circles with, and the pictures are all still the same beach blonde hair, the same buzz cut guys, and it's like two diametrically opposed pictures. And this is where we still stand in a lot of these organizations, because from an executive level, there's not accountability, there is not commitment to ensure that the people you hire on your teams all the way down the line are reflective of our society, are reflective of the communities in which they serve, are reflective of the population in which they're going out and communicating and are championing for. And and in addition, it improves our bottom line, because ultimately we have customers who we're trying to reach. And in order for us to have the voice of that customer, we need to have the reflection of those customers inside our organizations. And up until then, they can talk about DEI, they can have all the ERGs, they can have Women's History Month programs, but when women are 51% of the population and most of these corporate heads, there's not 50% are women. we still got a problem, and we're going to still have a problem.
Well,
So,
when women are 51% of the population, you have and of those women, there's a variety of women, right?
yes,
And you have an ERG conference, and there's not one speaker who's black. You
absolutely.
can't find
Well,
the
that's
only.
one of
I'm
the
sorry.
reasons I started my conference.
I'm sorry. You There was a black speaker. This is true story. Was a black speaker, black man, but it was a women's conference. It was for the women's ERG. It's like, so y'all, there was absolutely not a black woman you could have tapped into to ask to how do we get more black women, and they'll say, well,
Can I
there.
pause you for a second?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm going to go even further. And his role was probably in human resources, because I've seen this at all these corporations and at these
This
conferences.
one it wasn't, but
Okay.
yes.
But most of the time, if they're black, if they're Hispanic, and even at these larger conferences, that person is usually has an HR title.
HR or marketing.
Exactly. And it's like, well, where's the technical experts? Where's the doctors? Where are the engineers? They're there. And then you get, as you said, oh, well, we can't find them. Y'all not looking. You're
Well,
not looking.
yeah,
So
it's last but not least. This is what I will say also. You know, I remember at my previous employee employer, I there was an email that came out, and a gentleman was announcing the positions on his team, and there were and he was an Indian man, and there were 10 spots, and 9 were filled by other Indian men and women, and then one was a Hispanic man, and no problem. My manager hired me and another black woman and another black man to be on her team that also consisted of a white man, 3 Indian men, and a Hispanic man. And literally got the so like you gonna hire all the black people conversation. And I was like, that's very interesting that that email came out, and it didn't people didn't bat an eye. They didn't say anything about it. So
mhm,
it is certainly, that is still very much a
a
conundrum
conundrum.
that people don't want to be honest about.
Yes. And I can tell you from my experience, the most diverse teams are usually led by black women and black men, but black women more than even black men. I'm
Yeah.
gonna leave that there. All right, our next conversation in the oh wait, we got a comment here. Let's see. Sometimes roles in these programs are filled with folks that simply want to be on the roster with no commitment to the mission. Absolutely. It is a personal decision and commitment. If I can't give it 100%, I won't participate. I absolutely
Agreed.
agree with that. Um, but I also think it should contribute to compensation, and it should contribute to what we're going to be talking about next. And we kind of got 3 topics all lumped together. So salary negotiation, performance reviews, merit conversations. So let's talk about salary negotiation, the conundrum. Many of us are still just happy to get an offer.
Yeah.
And the conundrum and the question that still plagues many of us is, do I ask for more? Do I ask for my value? Do I even engage in a conversation based on my worth? And because sometimes we have the mindset of limited resources and that we're competing for resources, often, sometimes we'll just take it. And we've heard it from friends, from family. Just take what you can get so you could get your foot in the door. We don't need no more foots in the door. You
No.
need to ask for your worth. Now, I'm not saying be delusional now, because there are some people who are delusional out there.
Right.
But you can do market analysis. All the resources are out there now for you to do market analysis based on the market you live in, based on the job description, based on the job that you are seeking. You can find the data to go in comfortably based on your skills and experience to ask for your worth. And so the conundrum still exists though, because I've been laid off, or I'm just returning back to the workplace having come off of maternity leave. This is a big one for women, especially. And this is why women also stay behind the 8 ball on salary. Y'all, we got to ask. We got to ask for the money. So I don't want this to be a conundrum anymore, but it's still a conundrum for folks. It's still a question. It's still something that's confusing and a deliberation that folks are having with themselves around salary negotiation. What say you, sister?
Well, I will tell you, I recently had that conundrum. And I had the conundrum because what I was being offered was already an increase to what I had previously made. And it was a decent increase, right? So I was like, okay, well, that's cool. I don't need to ask for more. And honestly, it was my brother-in-law who's like, nah, yeah, you do. Still got to ask for something. And I think so there are two thoughts that I have here. Number one, companies do need to be more transparent. And I am appreciating that more companies seemingly are showing the salary range. You need to be transparent about what the range is. Because if you want to get the best people, then why would you hide that? Right? So that's number one. Number two, any company that is still basing it on your previous role, I take real deep issue with, because there's really a lot of circumstances around why you may have taken a certain salary at the time you took it. And here's the conundrum. Whatever you base yourself at, right, becomes in that particular company becomes the baseline for everything. Your merit increases, like you said, all of these things, that becomes the baseline now. So when I go to a new company, don't ask me about what I made at my previous role. Ask me what I want to be paid. And to your point, you can't be delusional, but also understanding that let me call it compensation. Compensation comes in many different forms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the place where now I'm understanding a lot more. Your girl likes days off, a lot of them, you know. And so maybe that means I may have to take a little less of a salary, but you're gonna have to run me some days off,
Mm-hmm.
some substantial PTO, especially like I said, if you're in a situation where if the company don't have a whole lot of paid holidays or what have you, you're gonna have to run me some PTO, or many things that at the individual contributor level that we don't do. We don't talk about what types of stock we can get in the company. We don't, our stock options. We don't even feel like we should have those conversations unless we're at a manager, or we're managing people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, we have to become more savvy in that regard. So at the end of the day, ask for something. I don't care what it is.
And with a lot of startups, you absolutely should ask for equity in a company.
Yes.
Absolutely should be asking for equity, because if it blows up, that's where you want to be. Right? You want when, or with that style, or if they then go IPO and go public, you want to have that to change the financial and economic trajectory of your entire life, as well as the life of your lineage. And we
Right.
don't do that enough, because we just happy that we getting paid something.
Well, I'm not gonna just say it like that, because that puts the onus on the individual. A lot of companies will, like listen, when I
But the
first,
onus is on us as individuals because see, some of us we did not learn this, but now that we know better, we do better, and the onus is on us to own our career.
absolutely, I'm not denying that. The onus is on us to own our career. However, there are some companies that believe that because they are the companies that they have the name and the brand recognition that they have, that you come a dime a dozen, and I don't really have to go out of the way for you. I think one of the things we just need to realize is negotiating a nicer salary for yourself based on what your needs are, and even what you feel like your work is valued at. It is it's usually not going to be I don't think it's usually not going to be a deal breaker. If they're worth their salt, they'll come back and say, well, if you want 200,000, I can't give you 200,000, maybe I can give you 175. Like they'll work at that.
Hmm.
If the company is worth its salt, I don't see why they wouldn't, because the process of finding an
Good talent.
employee is expensive.
Yes.
So they'd rather they could up your salary than spend the amount of time, money, and resources that they have to find somebody else. But let me just have this disclaimer: neither one of us works in human resources. Please contact your local human resource uh, personnel or
You
your
should definitely have a friend in HR, and that
consultant.
was advice that I shared with a client just the other day about having your do you have a friend in HR? Not any longer. You need to have a friend in or find a new friend in HR, because then this goes to this merit convers part of what we're going to talk about. If you, as you said, if you don't get it on your salary, and oftentimes if you're with a company for a number of years, if you don't get it on that front end salary, they will never be able to merit increase you up to make up that deficit. And even getting promotions, you're always going to be starting back over at that lower end of the pay grade and the pay band. Um, but really, what I want to talk about the corporate conundrum and merit conversations is I've been in the room where we have to calibrate our talent, or we have to talk about merit increases. And I don't know if y'all know, but they give you a budget. Like it's either 3%, it's 5%, your division gets a budget, your whatever, and you have to dole out that budget percentages. Sometimes it's truly based on merit and performance. Many times unconscious bias plays a role in the room. Well, they've been here a certain amount of time. Well, they got these circumstances going on in their family and life. All of those things are in that conversation. And if you're not confident about the conversation that your boss and or your boss's boss are going to have about you, then you need to start having some different type of conversations with your manager. Because
Well,
these are the conversations that are taking place, and you need to start having conversations about your performance in a way that it relates to what a merit conversation is going to sound like and going to look like. And I just really want people to understand that, because there are decisions that are made. Okay, this is another piece. I know I got off track, and I told you I wasn't going to get off track. Here's another piece. Sometimes you make a decision to give somebody a merit, but people two steps above you say, well, you know what? We want to give it to somebody else. And then it's cut. And then you're left sitting in that room having to explain that to that person. And
mhm.
it's antithetical to what you even put them up for. Trust me, that's a conundrum. It's a difficult situation to be in. And you have to have those conversations and be willing to have those conversations and stand on the company line, even when you might not agree with it. That is a conundrum that you find yourself in if you're in a leadership role. So I don't know. What say you, sister, about these married conversations?
I don't like them. That's what I say. I don't like them. I don't like the manner in which we
Evaluate.
the way in which we evaluate. I don't like these in the last few businesses that I've been in, they're really on this objectives and key results. And it's
Because if
it's
the
unfortunate.
objectives are written poorly, then it's
Right.
all a bunch of crap. If the objectives are not really aligned with what you're doing on a regular day, it's all a bunch of BS. I
Or
mean,
if the objectives may be written well and you may have wonderful results, but if it ain't moving the needle, if that ain't what matters to the people who are making the final decisions, you know, I do not like married conversations. I will be the first to say I'm not good at having those kind of conversations. I had a previous situation where for a long time, I was at the top or close to the top of my pay band, right?
mhm.
And I had a manager saying like you're at very top of your band, like, and I had somebody, the next manager, say, oh, your previous managers have taken care of you, you're like, because this particular, I had moved to a new group, and the new manager was like, typically we have to recalibrate for women because a lot of times their management hasn't sufficiently promoted
Compensated them.
them or compensated them, with merit increases. They were like, oh, your previous managers have taken really good care of you. Cool. And then I was having a conversation with one of my boys. You know what I'm saying? And I
Hmm.
was like, I'm not really tripping off of moving into a new grade level, right? Because this I'm closer to the top of the band for the grade level that I'm at. And he's like, yeah, but when they start giving these merit increases, if you're on the low end of the higher of the next grade, not going down in salary, but I'm saying you're at the high end of this grade.
Hmm.
You move up to the next grade, you're at the lower end of that grade, but it gives you more room in order to improve, advance, get those merit increases, things like that. Because then they start parsing those numbers like, we only got 3%. We know it's a bell curve. The vast majority of people going to be in here. Very few people on the tail are going to get the big increases. Very few people on the other side are going to get no increases at all. It just starts to be such a game,
Subjective.
and very subjective. And in
Very
fact,
subjective.
I had a previous manager tell me that she was in the meeting, and someone, it was me and another woman, and they were like, but it's the other woman's turn.
That's it. Like I said, that's what they do. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I found myself in those conversations like, oh, and we're going to talk about performance reviews next. I found myself in those conversations like, oh, I'm holding my people to a standard that y'all not holding y'all people to.
Right.
Because I actually have a standard and you
Right.
don't. You think showing up deserves a merit increase. You think showing up deserves a raise and a performance and exceeding expectation. No, showing up is not even meeting expectations. Because I used to just start pulling it and folks, I think that also lended to my reputation because then folks were like, oh, okay, she gonna come with the words, with the definitions, with all the stuff that HR says we're supposed to be following. We get these spreadsheets and charts and stuff, and it's like, no, 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 no. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this performance. And you mean just doing what you're supposed to do every day? That's not an exceeds expectations. I'm sorry. Um and linking it back to our earlier conversation about participating in extra things and extra work. Well, do we support that? Because then some organizations don't want to support that. And you're like, well, no, this person is doing their job and they're doing this extra stuff that's then adding to the betterment of this organization, this division, or to the bottom line, as you said. And you want to say, well, nobody told them to do that. Excuse me, or well, it's not their turn to get it right. I mean,
Well,
it's crazy.
like you said, sometimes the extra stuff, if the extra stuff is like an ERG or affinity group, and that's not valued when, and because this my other challenge, and I never have been in this, like, so I see Trey's comment saying interesting, it was between two women, one or the other. Maybe the question could have been, wait, what about person over here? So what I was told was, yes, at that time it was like, these two women, it's her turn, and then we'll catch this one next time. Well, then next time came around, and
sometimes next time might not come around.
Right. And I mean, the process came back around, but then at that point I was moving into another place. So, because I was like, I'm not going to sit in one place to wait on to be recognized. But again, it really does also boil down to what people think is the important work, And so it's all like, so with performance reviews, I put all that together: merit, performance reviews, all of that stuff. I do not enjoy any of them, and I don't ask the right questions, and I don't have the proper conversations, because a lot of times I feel like I talk to you you know what I'm doing. And if you don't know what I'm doing and you can't articulate it when it's time to have these conversations with your peers, that's another thing. Why all y'all getting in the group? And so y'all got to evaluate everybody who's at the same grade level.
Yes.
And then you're going to pick and choose the one or two people. Well, I'm likely not going to be the winner.
Well, I'm going to say this. So 2 points. So I share with my clients all the time, your work doesn't speak for you, you speak for you. So you most definitely need to get clear on the contributions you're making. You need to get clear on the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you have and how they contribute to your performance and or the objective. So whatever those goals and objectives are, you need to be able to articulate that, because your manager is not going to be able to articulate it. So you be able to write it up. You better have your little brag list, brag sheet, brag book, so that you are keeping track of your wins, because when it comes time to do those self-evaluations, you need to be armed and ready with all the information that you need.
Well, let me tell you something real quick. In a previous job that I had, my manager had told me all of these things. Now, he was not even my direct manager. He was like my skip level, like above my manager, right? And he had told me all these things, so I wanted to know, what is it that I need to do in order to. So he gave me this whole speech. And I wasn't writing anything down. I was just kind of listening. This is many years ago. And I was listening. But I went back into my office. I typed that bad boy up because I didn't want to forget it. And then the next time I had to review with my manager and him, I was like, so the last time we met, I put it in a triangle. Baby, I had a triangle. Like you said, this was at the top, this was in the middle, this was on the bottom, this is the base. And here are examples of bam, bam, bam. You know what that guy said to me? Wow, I never saw anybody write it on paper like this. So again, sometimes even when you go the extra mile of providing tangible evidence that these were the things you told me I had to do, and here's how I did each one of those things. You told me this was the base, this was the middle, this was the pinnacle. I did all of those things, and your response is you never saw it written. You never saw the triangle drawn. I've never seen it drawn out like this. And so, needless to say, still didn't get,
And but again, you have it, and then when if you are met with that response, that's when you have to decide, is it time for me to seek excellence elsewhere? Right.
Right.
And go into a whole different type of conversation. So let's talk about seeking excellence elsewhere. So there is a corporate conundrum. Well, let me see, because I'm looking at the time we have. We have a few other things on here. Um, let's talk about the golden handcuffs.
Okay.
Let's talk about the golden handcuffs. Um, Many of us find ourselves in circumstances and situations because we've attained a certain salary, we've attained a certain rank, we got the corporate card, we got the corporate car, we got the fuel card, all our service, all the different things, and we're miserable.
Mhm.
And we are absolutely miserable. Or we're at the point where we're doing this job in our sleep, it doesn't challenge us anymore, and we're bored. But we will not even look or entertain another opportunity. We won't even step out because it's like we are shackled to all of the trappings of success. And that's a conundrum that many people find themselves in, especially mid career professionals. You
Yep.
might find yourself, I've excelled, I've gotten to here, but I'm not breaking through at this organization. But if I leave, I don't want to start over. If I leave, oh, have you ever found yourself in golden handcuff system?
Girl, don't ask me that question.
Okay, well,
Girl,
I ain't
I
gonna
got
ask.
these shackles on my feet right
And
now.
you can't dance. Okay.
Right.
All right. All right. Well, we're gonna leave that alone. We're not gonna go deep into that. I just want to say,
Well, no,
listen,
I do want
it's
to.
a conundrum that many of us are still dealing with. And if you are dealing with that, I would say find you a coach and find you someone to help you come up with a plan and a strategy. You can come up with an exit strategy. You can come up with an exit plan. You can go and say, hey, you know what, this is no longer working for me and no longer working for you. Let's go ahead and get this severance done and get me on out of here. You can do that. You
You
can release yourself. Be free.
you can. You can also decide, hey, I really like the salary and the benefits at this place, but I'm gonna have to get my fulfillment elsewhere. And
Hmm.
I think that, and I know we had quiet quitting on there to talk about as well. Um, there's a lot of people who are doing what we call quiet quitting, meaning they're doing just enough of the work that needs to get done. But
I
they're
ain't trying to
willing
get no merit increase. I
to,
ain't trying
right,
to do
get
no,
a
I'm not putting a line to this self-evaluation. You can evaluate me how you want to. It's good. I'm keeping it pushing.
right. I'm gonna do as much as I need to do to keep this particular job and keep this salary and these benefits, and then I'm gonna find my creative or entrepreneurial, um I'm gonna fulfill those needs elsewhere.
Hmm.
That's why a lot of people are got the side hustles. um I think the thing about the golden handcuffs, like you said, when you're mid professional, when you're midlife, you are thinking about, especially if you're in this sandwich generation, right?
Hmm.
You are thinking about, how do I leave a legacy for my children? How do I have enough for my own retirement? And then how am I in a position to help my family, my parents, or what have you, if need be? And there's a lot of factors. I'm never going to bemoan anybody who stays in a corporate position because it is it is paying their bills. I
Hmm.
just will say though, you know, just be honest with yourself
Yes.
about why you're still doing it. I think you and I often talk about what's your number, finding what your number really is. Because so often, like, I've had friends who are like, I have to stay here because they were close to retirement, but they needed medical insurance. Like,
Yes. And that's a real,
and that's a
real
real
thing.
issue, right?
Hmm.
So I'm not gonna say, My sister just be wanting me to quit jobs like I'm done. But I have other goals and aspirations, and sometimes those golden handcuffs, those that salary and those benefits help you fuel and fund the other things that you want to do in life. So
Absolutely. And hey, and I'm not bemoaning anybody who stayed. I stayed. I said I was gonna ride it till the wheels fell off, and then the wheels fell off one day, and it
yeah.
kept it moving. Yeah.
Yes, and once the wheels fall off, you can make other choices and decisions. But very often, the conundrum then is, I was making blank. I was making 250,000 at this job, and so I can't go back down to 100,000.
Yeah.
Like that becomes even if it's something that you love and you're passionate about, that becomes the next conundrum. So
There's a comment here. It says the older we are, the more difficult it is to make those choices. Ageism is a thing that to break the handcuff is a big risk. And you are absolutely right. Ageism is a thing, sexism is a thing, racism is a thing. All the isms are out there, honey. and they are still pervasive. And I posted something earlier today on Facebook. It was like about, I don't know why anybody is still buying anything that Elon is selling, because you talk about someone who has a loud megaphone and who is trying to single-handedly dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. Ageism is a part of that diversity conversation. People don't
right.
want to talk about that. Ableism, people, there's all kind of isms out there that we're fighting against, and that the whole reason why we have diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging arms of organization is because everyone has value, and we
Yeah.
should be valuing everyone.
Yeah.
So let's
Absolutely.
talk about values. Let's talk about that at the end, and talk about a corporate conundrum. So think about the people who are working at X, or who are working at Tesla, and now have a CEO and a leader who, I guarantee, if we pulled out their employee handbook and their corporate documents and values, it is totally not aligned with what he is saying and spewing. What do you do when you find yourself in that conundrum of like, this is not what I signed up for, and my values are now being compromised? What do you say? Think about all the people who work for the Trump organization. I think, just reflecting back, I think I watched the Apprentice maybe the first 2 seasons. But I think about what's his name? The financial guy
Mhm.
who went to jail, or who Andrew whatever Weisselman, whatever that man's name is. I have to look it up. Um but I think about those people who knowingly are doing tactics that are not aligned with their values, how they stay. And sometimes they stay because of golden handcuffs. I don't know. What do you do in those situations, Citla?
Um, some people do nothing.
I know you've talked about a situation before at a former employee where you're like, okay, this CEO up in here is saying stuff, and it's like, wait a minute, bro, this ain't this
Yeah,
ain't it.
yeah, no. Well, what's so funny for me with values, right? So there are a plethora of management books. You and I have talked about, the 7 habits of highly effective people. There's good to great. There is any number of them, of these management books, and Who Moved My Cheese. Like there's so many of these management books, and it's funny to me because there are so many companies uh, who are talking about, we use these principles, we stand by this, and just read this book and that's who we are. And it's like, that's really not who you are. Number one, if I write a book and every company decides to adopt it, absolutely, you're doing the right thing. It's like, the author is trying to make money too, right?
Right.
They don't know your organization like that. Just like, we're having this conversation, many people can write a book and offer their perspective on a thing. And if you as your organization choose to adopt it, the first thing I'm like, but did everybody read the
Read
book?
the
So are
book.
we all on the same page? That's first thing. Second thing, when you talk about values, people usually have a mission statement, they have a vision statement, but a lot of times they don't even know the values that they're trying to articulate.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have it on your corporate website, but that those values don't trickle down to every single business unit. So the person who is just coming in, they may get a PowerPoint deck, they may get an employee handbook where the values are listed, but every leader in that company doesn't necessarily live those values.
Absolutely.
And it because let's be honest, everybody who's a leader in a company is not a leader of people. They just a
Everybody that has a title
lot, yes,
is not a leader, and
right,
everybody who has decision making power and responsibility are definitely not leaders of people.
right.
Um,
So values is a very interesting thing. What I would say to anybody, and myself included, is I think that if something is diametrically opposed to how you what you truly believe, you're not gonna survive it. Like at some point, you're not gonna be able to, like it. That's like me being like, I'm a Christian, but I'm going every day and they having ceremonies and worshiping the devil. Like I'm not gonna be able to do it at some point, right? So I just think that's the thing. At some point, you have to look at your value system, and if your values don't align with what is on paper, but better yet, what is being practiced
amen.
on a regular basis, then at some point you're going to have to make some tough decisions because you wouldn't be capable of staying. I don't think you'd be capable of staying in that environment for very long.
And the truth is, I think people stay and they stay in it long past than the time they should. So I would say that none of it, any of these corporate conundrums that we found ourselves in discussing or that you may have found yourself in, I hope some of y'all drop some in the comments. Some of y'all might have fear that y'all don't want to drop it. So drop it anonymously or something and let's talk about it. But I hope that with any of these corporate conundrums that people find themselves in, I hope that we all know and accept the fact that our mental, physical, and emotional health is worth far more than the stress that we might be dealing with if we find ourselves in one of these conundrums. So if any time you're in a conundrum and your mental, physical, emotional health starts to take a hit, it's time to go. It's
Well,
time to
it's
go.
certainly time to reevaluate.
It's time to reevaluate. It's time to go. I mean, not that doesn't necessarily mean you leave your organization,
Right.
right? But that might mean you, okay, I'm looking for a new opportunity within this organization. This might mean I need to come up with an exit strategy. It might mean that, you know what, I need to reassess what's important to me and how I'm going to have this fit into my life.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you got to do something. It's time for action for sure because our health is our wealth. Because at the end of the day, nobody is going to be thinking about and talking about, I wish I would have just had one more day of going to work. So that's my closing statement for the corporate conundrum. What's your closing statement, sister?
My closing statement for the corporate conundrum is I use a lot of personal examples. And look, I don't believe in burning bridges. So I definitely don't want any conversations that I have to be seen um, as trying to undermine or demean any of my previous experiences. I just believe that, in whatever we do, we should always seek to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want somebody is where I started the conversation about that post on LinkedIn. One of my sorority sisters says, ABI, always be interviewing. And I thought that was very solid advice. And that doesn't even mean, sometimes that's interviewing outside of your organization for sure, right? Because you do need, you're talking about the market, and understanding what your value is. Sometimes you got to test the market to see, if you're being underpaid,
Yes.
and see if there's an opportunity. And sometimes you bring that insight and information back in, and you can say, hey, this other company is offering me XYZ. Now, if your company is like, sorry, we can't match that, or we're not willing to give you more, then you got to be ready to make that move too. But I think that the bottom line is we spend so we have 24 hours in a day. A third of that time, 8 hours, is spent, or more, is spent in the workplace. The people who love us the most, who care about us the most, our families, our children, spouses, what have you, partners, what have you, friends. Those are the people who we take the most amount of time from when we are trying to work these jobs, climb the corporate ladder, have a seat at the table, whatever we want to call it. And so I think it really does boil down to us being able to say, what is it all worth? What is it really worth to us? And so in some situations, yes, like Jaime said, the older we get, it's really difficult to make certain choices. You have a lot to consider. Medical insurance, health insurance, 401k, retirement, all these things. You have a lot to consider. But knowing your number is important, understanding what your values are, and being able to and again, always be interviewing. I think interviewing, whether that's informational interviews inside of your organization, inside other groups, to see what they're talking about and what kind of fun, challenging stuff that they're doing, or outside, always be interviewing, because at the end of the day, every business is in business to make money, and they owe us no loyalty. And so we have to start operating with the sense of, how do I, what is my game plan? How do I put myself in the best possible situation? And like I said, it ain't no hate, no shade to no organizations I've ever been with, but it is to say that it took a while, but I got to look out for me and my best interests, because I'm the only one who will.
Absolutely. And with that being said, I thank you all for tuning in tonight to Hey Sister. We look forward to catching up with you on next Sunday. And good night, everybody.